Yes. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks for having me, bud.
You gave me the push to originally record this show, and I thought it was only right to have you back. We had some technical issues trying to get up and running, but honestly, I wanted to just do it. So I'm glad we're in Zoom and making this happen. In our first conversation, we were 20. The original recording air date was October 1st, 2017. Now we're
Yeah, I was about to ask you when that episode aired or was recorded. It's almost 10 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah. So we recorded in 2017. Right now it's March 2026. We're both 29. So the original premise of the show was the journey of your 20s. We're on the other side of it here, and it only felt right to have this conversation. So I'm going to bridge from our last interview. Believe it or not, the last 3 minutes of the time that we spoke then was you saying your issues with social media. And
Oh, really?
yeah. So
Hilarious.
I'll start it off with one of the quotes that you said. And you talked about performative living. You said, people will literally live their lives for other people. I'm eating this food so that I can have good content for my Instagram page so that my Instagram followers can like this. Instead of, I'm going to eat this food because I like it.
I still agree with that statement to this day.
And the other thing you said was on losing authenticity. You said, people are forgetting to be them and kind of just live their way, not live in a certain way so that they can talk about living that certain way.
Yep, I still agree with that too.
So the reason I wanted to have you as the first person that I spoke to as I'm relaunching Unmapped is you spent a decade off of social media, a decade where social media has changed drastically, has had significant impacts on the lives of those in their 20s, and has shaped, honestly, the millennial generation, Gen Z much more, that has had a significant impact on the millennial generation. I can't say that word. The first question I have for you is, staying off of social media for a decade, how do you think that's impacted your life?
I mean, I think what I said back then, still applies today. I think one of my favorite things about me is that when I'm with people I really care about or things that I'm stimulated by, I am fully present in that moment. So I'm not really looking at my phone or worried about the optics of something or concerned that there's somebody really looking over my shoulder, judging and analyzing my every move. So that's been really freeing in a sense because, yeah, like I said back then, I think a lot of people that go online are really just doing it because they want to show off or want to get some kind of surface level validation or importance from virtual sources, right? Um, I think there's a lot of cliched statements out there, like live in the moment and all that. But, I think there's a lot of validity to those statements. Um, you know, One of my favorite things is, they'd say, dance like no one's watching. I think I live my life like that to this day. I read something the other day that embarrassment is an underexplored emotion. And I think people, especially people who are very, um, I guess, involved on social media, don't follow that rule much. They don't get embarrassed anymore. They're so scared of being themselves. They're so scared of being authentic. They're so scared of, having their true self out there on the internet. And it's really quite sad because some of the best moments that I've ever had and the best connections and promotions or offers or experiences that, in general have always been on the other side of embarrassment. And I think that's so important for people to learn especially at a young age. I wish I knew this more back then when we had that first talk, because I've just kind of grown in that regard over the years. But I'm really fine with being embarrassed. When at your wedding was one of them, I love to dance at weddings. One of my wedding gifts that I can give to people, because sometimes I can't afford one, is that I will go out on the dance floor and dance like a crazy buffoon for minimum 2 hours to liven up the dance floor. And I don't care what I look like. I don't have particularly good dance moves. I just flop around like I don't care. But yeah, I think I think, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but in short, it's just learning how to be authentic and being okay in my own skin and not worrying that somebody's watching me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely corroborate that your presence is a present. I have wedding pictures to prove it where you're aggressively dancing on the dance floor. It's something that I think I've definitely noticed in your interactions over the course of the, last decade that has stayed consistent, and is very palpable when you're having in-person conversations. People are so concerned about their persona and that the way that they come off that they are almost frightened to just be themselves. And I will say from my, firsthand experience of doing recordings, having done recordings when I was in my 20s, I had this like undeniable, like just willingness to be embarrassed live in front of people. And I tell people now, I think a part of that was that my prefrontal cortex didn't develop. Before 25, I just didn't have this concern for people. But at the same time, I think the upsetting thing about social media is that we are now in this point in time where when you do put out anything into the world, you have the eyes of everyone out there, and they have the opportunity to look at you, and you're fearful of the judgment of that. And that makes you second guess your own actions, your own way of being, your own kind of thought process of how you want to kind of portray yourself into the world. One interesting thing that you're saying here is that you are very cognizant of being present. Do you feel like you've noticed that difference kind of diverge over time for those that have stayed very much so on social media versus like yourself, who's kind of stayed much more akin to the physical world?
Yeah. I think it's a dual-edged sword there because, on one side of it, when I'm with somebody, I'm not checking my phone. I'm not distracted by notifications. I'll pick up my phone if somebody wants to call me, but for the most part, I really don't look at it. The other side of that is that sometimes it'll take me 3 years to get back to you by text message. So, mm, yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. I think it's just developed more and more over the years too. As you get older and as become more mature and your brain develops more and you start having newer perspectives and, new epiphanies, you kind of get one every so few months or years and such. And that's just kind of just reinforced in my mind as a recurring theme, because sometimes you'll learn something and then as you get older, you realize that that thing that you just learned wasn't true. And maybe I got to switch up the way I look at things. But that one's always kind of remained true for me. Um, and if you talk to older people that lived prior to the internet and this connectivity, they just seemed a lot happier. They seemed a lot happier and less worried. Um, and yeah, I just think it causes so much stress, especially for younger people who are, at that age, so concerned about their image and the optics and being accepted and having to fit in all this stuff. So that theme has always remained true for me.
Yeah, I mean,
Always.
it's almost the polar opposite of what your 20s are supposed to be, of figuring it out, because the vein of social media is that you have figured it out. It's to show that you've done something, and those are the things that people will be interested in. Whereas the messiness of like figuring it out is not sexy. Like people, aren't the most like interested in that. I think more and more people are starting to feel that as social media has moved away from it being a feed of your friends to being a feed of businesses, personalities that are already famous, influencers who are, specifically talking to, whatever it is that they're doing that is, quote unquote put together. Um,
Mm.
and to your point, I think older folks who did not grow up in this world. I mean, even for us, like we are the last generation that knows the difference between the world prior to the internet. We saw dial up, we saw phones coming into the world, we saw the internet adapt and change in the way that it did. We're, in my opinion, like that last bridge that has seen the world without and the world with. So there is a key distinction in our brain that there is a world that actually exists where, you don't have the internet. Um, a question for you would be, you know, having had the optionality to be present digitally, do you feel like you missed out not being on social media for a decade? Or do you feel like you've gained a lot staying off of in your 20s and are happy about the decision of coming back to it now?
I do feel like there's yeah, I do feel like I've missed out on a couple things, and it's not the recognition or the dopamine you get from notifications or likes or all that. It's really just about the human connection because I've lived in so many different places and met so many different cool people that as the years have gone by, I just haven't stayed in touch with. Right. And now as I'm coming back online and, connecting with people, it's been really, what's the term? Say reassuring, but um, yeah, just I don't know. I just feel like I'm connecting with a lot of people that I haven't spoken to in many years, and that's just been really supportive for me. So yeah, in that way, I feel like I missed out on connecting with people that are really important to me, or I had really great experiences with. And it doesn't necessarily have to be really close friends. It could be just acquaintances or people that I used to go have beers with on occasion. But I think your network of people is so important, not only from a professional standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. And I think that's been the biggest thing that I feel like I've missed out on over the years. So, yeah, I've sacrificed, that connectivity and being able to, have rapport and touch base with people, but I've gained all the other positives that we've already discussed. So,
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. And even for you in the, short week or two that you've been on social, just being able to see through your eyes is the part that like I used to love so much. And that's the part that like I really try to focus on, even though I do have a part of me that wants to do the content creation side. Um,
mm,
a big thing for you, this next part I want to talk about identity. So you were born in Johannesburg, South Africa. You lived in Hong Kong from the ages of 1 to 7, Switzerland from the ages of 7 to 13, and then in the US from 13 on. And then now you're back in South Africa. And I think you talking to the connectivity piece here, it kind of goes hand in hand with this conversation on identity. So I want to ask you, as someone who's moved around so much in their life, what does identity mean to you? And do you think that you're potentially averse to social and creating a digital persona because it was yet another identity you had to create?
good questions. What does identity mean to me? I don't necessarily have long-winded answers for these. I think I might just put it out into bullet points for ease of organizing my thoughts here. But the older I get, family is kind of at the top of that. So, that saying is, show me the five people you spend the most time with, and I'll show you who you are. I think that's very accurate. So if you surround yourself with really good people, friends and family, then those people start to rub off on you, um, and start to mold your worldview and your habits and your actions. And that leads to the second point, which is your identity is built up by what you do every day, right? Not what you post, not what you're interested in, not what you like, not the videos you watch. It's the actions you take and the experiences that you follow and pursue. I think those two are really, really important. Um, I think culture and heritage is also up there as well. Like this past 2 weeks of me being here back where it all started, has been a real reminder of that, because even though I didn't live here for so long, South African culture just followed our family from one place to another. There's all these little slangs and sayings and cultural norms that we did, mm, and that we still do, that kind of shape how you see the world. And I think that's just been really reinforced in the last couple of weeks for me here. There's some funny little sayings that we had that I never knew why we said them or why we did them. And now I'm talking to my grandma and, hearing stories about me when I was a kid and then figuring out, oh, that's why we say that. You know, it just kind of reinforces all of this stuff. So I think your heritage and culture are up there as well. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Those are the main ones for me right now. And then to answer your second question about identity, was talking to a friend of mine in Florida who I met and gotten to know while working there. And I was talking about this exact thing, that every time you move to a new place, you kind of dilute your identity a little bit, right? You you go into an environment in which you're not comfortable with and you feel out of place in. And every human on earth wants to feel like they belong and that they are included. So you inadvertently and subconsciously start to kind of mimic the people around you. So you start speaking a certain way. That's why I speak the way I do, right? I have an American accent. You start talking about the things that they talk about. You start doing the things that they do. And so you dilute your identity. So yeah, I think over the years, it's been tough for me to figure out, you know, where who am and where I'm from. Like, am I American? Am I South African? Am I German? Am I Swiss? And I honestly, I still don't know. um, but I think I'm starting to figure it out. So yes, I do think that going online is another version of that, where you're kind of diluting yourself because you're spreading yourself thin and it's all quite surface level. People online never post the negative things, which are so important as part of somebody's identity. People don't post the I mean, they do, but it's rare, or they post the struggle that they go through or the tragedies they went through or the loss they experienced or the failures they experienced, right? Because everything's about optics, right? So when I truly know somebody and I truly connect with somebody, I'm not connecting with just the positives. I'm connecting with the negatives too. I'm accepting them for who they are, despite the failures and the losses and the tragedies. And in marriage, right? Take the good with the bad, right? That goes for all relationships, right? And so I think when you go online, it's important to almost, and I haven't done this yet, but at some point I will, to almost like quote unquote out yourself, right? It's that I'm not a perfect person. I've made some huge mistakes. I've failed so many times along the way. I am a flawed individual. So that people can know that, you know, who you see online is the true version of yourself. And it just allows for better connections. And it goes back to what I said earlier about being authentic and genuine, being embarrassed, right? You have to embrace those negative feelings and those negative emotions. And I just don't think that that's done enough online.
There's a lot to unpack there. So I think first of all, when it comes to showing failures online, I think there is now also a weird culture. I will say it's needle in a haystack, but there are certain folks that are out there that are willing to share everything. But I also think there's this weird optics angle to sharing your failures where that is now also a way to garnish engagement. You're sharing the things that are going wrong for the sake of it's something that people might relate to. I've seen reels of like nurses who, after something has gone horribly wrong, like taking a video of them crying. And it's like, that's a very, in my opinion, a very bizarre reaction to something going catastrophically wrong. So there's that side of it. And then The reason that I still want to pursue this is to your point, getting the full picture of a person. And I think marriage is kind of the perfect example of that, where you when you build a relationship that is truly, you know, from both sides, whether that's marriage, whether that's long term friendships, whatever it may be, there's a requirement for both people to be 100% them, and for both people to accept 100% of each person, because there's really no option to have someone in your life and only accept parts of them. But that is what we do on social media. We are accepting certain parts of a person that they're willing to put out for us, and we decide to ingest that information for whatever the reason may be. So I 100% hear you there. When it comes to the identity piece, I think the mention that you have of going back to your roots and culture is something that I've noticed a lot of people as they've gotten older to be more conscious of, and myself included. Even in college, when I would say I was from Bangladesh, right? So I would pronounce the A in that way, where it's Bangladesh, right? And as I've gotten older, like I've come to realize, like that is a part of who I am. A huge part of my identity is where my parents are from, where their parents are from, where their parents are from. And that, I think, when you're a little bit younger, it may not come through as much, but you realize a lot of the way that you are, the way that you think, the way that you look, all of it comes from your lineage. And there's a importance to that, and like taking into consideration, like, just like kind of where your story started. It didn't start just from where you started. It started from way before then, and it's going to continue beyond you. And there's a lot to take into consideration for that, and not to be like grim, but like there's our existence of like 100 years. Let's say it really is just like a blip of time. And I know anyone who is approaching their 30s, in their 30s, feels it, like the difference between the expedition of time from when you're in your early 20s, of like, it feels like you have so much time, to where you're kind of in your 30s and you're like, whoa, this is going by quick. Like, please, like, like slow down. Like, I'm trying to keep up, but it's just so difficult to, throw in responsibilities, throw in all the other things you have to do as, you progressively adopt more responsibilities. It becomes much harder to hold on to your time. So I'm gonna segue now into moving a little bit away from social media. This is more on just generally for you. In the last decade, what have been the most unexpected wrong turns you've taken and lessons that you've learned?
I think one of the main ones for me is I became increasingly more risk averse over time. As life kind of beats you down and you kind of get hit from all sides. It's almost like if you ever gone surfing and you get hit by this wave, get hit in the tumble dryer, you're flipping upside down all over the place, right? And you don't know which way is up, which way is down. You finally emerge from the surface to get some air just for another wave to hit you, right? You That happens enough times, you're just not going to go surfing anymore, right? Like you're just, all right, I'm done with that. And that was, I don't want to call it a regret, but it was a big lesson. I learned that you need to maintain that risk aversion, especially when you're young, and continually take calculated risks and not worry so much. I think as life gets more and more serious, and like you said, your list of responsibilities and tasks and to dos and insurance policies and utility bills and
All the
all
fun
this stuff
stuff.
that piles up, all the fun stuff that builds up as you get older, you forget about. You don't dream anymore. You don't want to take risks anymore. You just want to be in your comfortable bubble because that's manageable and you can work with that, right? You can, if you just stick to your routine every day, you wake up at the same time, you eat the same thing, drive the same route to work, you do the same things at work, come home, feed the dogs, make dinner, do laundry, watch the same show, and then go to sleep. You know, yeah, it's a little boring, but it's manageable. right? There's not a lot of question marks behind that. It's only on the other side of taking risks that you start seeing some major improvements in your life. Um, I'm not saying from a you know uh, productivity standpoint, but from a fulfillment standpoint. So that was a big thing for me is that I started taking less and less risks because I just gotten hit way too many times. And it happens very subconsciously and it happens slowly but surely over time where it kind of just sneaks its way in under the surface and you don't even realize that it's happening until you blink and years have gone by and you're like, what was, what happened to all my plans? What? And then as you approach 30, there's also this looming feeling of like, is it too late? Right. And, social media, not to bring that back up, but kind of adds to that because there's this comparison game that you start playing, right? You see online all these people that are doing well and are living healthy, wonderful lives. And you start comparing yourself to them, like, is it too late? Can I still bounce back? And the answer is yes, of course. So that was a really big one for me. Another hard pill to swallow for me was that being a good person does not equate to success from a professional or financial standpoint. It's not enough. You cannot, you know, get a promotion or a raise or start a successful business by just solely being a good person. In fact, it actually can be negative sometimes if you're too nice, right? Because you don't set correct boundaries and that affects your relationships. And then people, again, subconsciously take advantage of you. They're not really trying to, but that just happens. So that was a big eye opener for me. It's like I can't just be honest and care for other people and put other people first. There's another side to it that you need to pursue. And something I listened to the other day from Alan Watts. He was talking about this, and it kind of plays into what the other two I was talking about. But you know, and as you get older, you start to experience loss, right? People in your life pass away. And that's something you have to, tackle as you get older. But it is a very stark reminder that we're only here for maybe 80 years, right? For us in our tiny little world, it feels like a long time. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a blip. It's a blip. Right? You cannot take your money with you. You cannot take your car with you. You cannot take your house with you, or any of these materialistic things with you. And I guess, in short, you saying it's just not that serious. It's not that serious. And when you understand that things really don't matter, it's kind of this backwards way of thinking. And a lot of my realizations have been around that. When you realize that things really don't matter, the right things start to matter, if that makes sense. It kind of goes back to when I've talked to people who have met their soulmate or their wives, people who are really they're in love with, a lot of the time, they met them at the least expected time when they weren't looking for somebody and they were just like, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing and focus on me. And then that person appeared in their life, right? It's almost like they ran into them by accident. It's one of Dan Gilbert who wrote Stumbling on Happiness. That was one of the main themes in that book, is that there's this backwards way of having good things in your life. You can't chase them. You almost have to run backwards. There's this episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza decides one day to do the opposite of his norm, do the opposite of his MO. That whatever he normally does, he's just going to do the complete opposite as a test, and starts to realize that things are working out better. If you're constantly chasing money, then you're never really going to get it. Right? It's this backwards way of thinking of like, what if I chased the things I was really passionate about? The things I really cared about, right? And just focused on that. And I've heard countless CEOs and people who have really succeeded in life, and that's been the case for them. They didn't build a company or start something because there was money to be made. They did it because they were passionate about it, and then the money just happened to show up, right? Obviously, it's a lot more complex than that, but that's really a big realization I've had is it's not that serious, and don't chase things. Build your build yourself up and things will gravitate towards you. Yeah, and don't worry as much. I worried so much. I've lost so much sleep over the years about stuff. And it's not they're not consequential, right? Like, all right, I'm gonna turn my heat on, I'm gonna get to work, how am I gonna pay this bill? And of course they're consequential, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter. The stuff that matters is the connections and the people that you make and how you contribute to the world and your legacy and your family and your community, right? Those are the things that really matter. So it's kind of this back asswards way of thinking, but
I don't think
it
so at
makes me
all.
feel a lot better.
When you are constantly in this mode of chasing it, you are so conscious of what needs to be done, similar to me not launching in a decade, that you you get this, the process analysis, which we also talked about then, but, like, you just don't make a move. And to tie this back into the risk aversion, the thing that you have to keep in mind is taking those calculated risks, still doing things that, like, may be out of your comfort zone, doing things that puts you in scenarios that you may not be in otherwise. So, I think this is something that, older people tend to say pretty often as well, is, uh when you have the opportunity to say yes to something, to say yes, because you don't know when that opportunity is going to arise again. And the program that, I've been a part of for 8 years, um, the fact that I taught an undergraduate class, none of those things would have ever happened if I didn't hit record on our first episode. And the reason I always come back to the idea that, like, creatives and folks that are trying to create things, there's this constant resistance, this feeling that you need to do something, but not doing it past your better judgment. So you know that you need to get this thing done. You know that you're better off for doing it, but you put it off because of concern, because of worry, and it ties into what you're saying about, like, it's not that serious. I say that all the time. You know, I say it all the time. My wife doesn't love it when I say it because it's sometimes it is serious. But I think holding that true of letting yourself still be silly. I think most of this conversation has been relatively serious, but I think one thing that we do that we might not be, I said doo doo, that might not be catching in this interview so far is, like, anytime that you've been going through trials and tribulations, we always bring it back to, like, let's still be us. Let's still be silly. Let's still, like, live life because there's still so much living to do. So
Mm.
that's something that I've been trying to, continually do as well. I think as you get older, optimism becomes more expensive. And,
Mm.
like, like, I've seen it happening to so many people where it really is like, you have less time, you have more responsibilities, you have more actual financial bills that, you have to get taken care of. And dreaming and passions and fulfillment and all this stuff, it's expensive. And when you have that approach, when you're not thinking of, like, okay, what, am I gonna get out of this? Then you just get to do it for the sake of doing it. And I think it becomes a much
Mm.
easier thing. Um, and it's I think it gets a lot tougher. So the next question I would have for you is, if you could reach back to the mic, I'm sorry, if you could reach back to that first recording of us speaking, what would you tell us about navigating the years that followed?
Something's gonna something's gonna happen throughout the course of your 20s, and you need to be prepared for it. And this is, I guess, the best way to explain it is that throughout your 20s, you're at the most extreme version of being at the border of your past and your future. So you're gonna feel like you're being squeezed between the two, right? You're old enough to have regrets about the mistakes you've made and the failures that have happened and the loss and the pain and all that. right? So you're old enough to experience and think about that and put all that energy towards that. But you're also young enough that the future is also this huge question mark and it's really scary. So as that happens, you start to kind of get squeezed between the two, right? And if you let it, at some point it's just going to meld into one thing, and you won't be able to enjoy the moment anymore. You're just going to be worried about the future, and you're going to be regretful about the past. And I think that's a very cornerstone part of your experience in your 20s, right? Because you're still trying to figure out where you're going, but you've been far enough that you can kind of look behind you, if that makes sense. Just focus on what's immediately in front of you, right? And the people that are immediately around you. And you'll feel a lot better. You'll feel a lot better. And I think we already talked about it. Memento mori, you're going to die someday. And people in your life are going to die. And it sucks. But that's just part of life. And so make the most of it. Spend as much quality time with those people as you can. Have those amazing experiences. Take those risks. What do you, at the end of the day, seriously have to lose? What do you have to lose? It's not that serious. Like when people get in cold water and they're not embracing it, they just feel colder for longer, as opposed to once you get in and you're in it and you accept it and you let it go, then you're like, this doesn't feel so bad. It's kind of nice. I'm actually cooled down. I'm comfortable. The sun's shining on me. This is great. Now I can actually have conversations with people, or I can enjoy the music that's playing because I'm not so, arms above the water, not trying to get my nipples wet type, you know, headspace, right? Get your nipples wet. I guess.
Get your nipples.
That's that's my advice, I guess, to younger Alex is just get your nipples wet and move your.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. The saying of getting cold feet, that's a common phrase. When someone has cold feet, whether it's getting married, whether it's, getting a new job, it is that fear, it's the shriveling up. It's that, like, all of the things that come with being indecisive and, like, not making a decision. Whereas, to your point, just get your nipples wet and you'll be all right. So that's a good that's advice that people are going to start giving out now, I hope. And people will have no
I hope so,
context.
yeah.
Yeah, people just next time
Well,
next time a 20-year-old asks you for advice, maybe don't say it, but you go, "What should I do in my life?" You go, "Just get your nipples wet." And they're like, what do you?"
and then just walk away. Never see it again.
I mean, they'll never forget you if you did that. For the rest of their
Yeah.
life, if an older person told me when I was 20, "Yo, just get your nipples wet," for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
I would just think, "Why did that person tell me to get my nipples wet?" And I would just be trying to figure it out.
Right.
Well, I'll move on from that. So the last question I'm going to ask you here. So hindsight is 2020. You're saying, not to be risk averse, to get away from being callous and comfortable in your routines, and you, at this point in time, having all the experiences that you've had to date and all the experience that you've yet to have on the current imperfect path that you're walking in life, what is your current definition of success?
Mhm. I would say doing things as an adult in a responsible way, but they make you feel like a kid. Does that make sense? I
So,
think
like,
that the happiest I've ever been is when I'm doing things that make me feel like a kid again, right? That's why I love the outdoors so much, because I loved doing that as a kid. That's why I love animals so much, is that was such an important part of me being a kid. That's why I like games, playing video games. It makes me feel like a kid again, right? And I think people are so scared of exploring that or allowing that to take hold because you're expected to be very responsible and very serious and, have it all figured out and, get your taxes done on time and all the stuff we've kind of already talked about. But you still need to be responsible, right? Still show up, on time, still follow through, still, you know, get on a call, pay your bills, all that stuff. But also be a kid. Be a kid. It's fine. It's okay. It's actually good. Um, And, you know, I would consider myself to be quite a goofy individual. But when I am that way, it makes me really happy because I was a really goofy kid. And the fact that I haven't changed or that hasn't gone away, I am so happy about because, you know, people who are very serious adults are actually really boring and they're not fun to be around, you know? And those kind of people, um, a lot of the time they don't, sure, they might get some professional accolades. They might get, more interviews or they might get promotions, but they're not building genuine connections. And by the end of it, 20, 30 years are going to go by. Sure, they've made a lot of money and, done well in the professional world, but they're going to look around. There's actually nobody around to share it with, right? Because they just decided to not be a kid anymore. And I think that's super important. Obviously, goes without saying. Still be an adult. You have responsibilities. Don't shirk those. But when you're given the choice to do the adult thing, do the kid thing, and there's no negative, do the kid thing. Say you kind of have to have this fuck it mentality and say, fuck it, we're gonna go out on a bike ride. Fuck it, we're gonna go on the river. Fuck it, I'm gonna get my nipples wet.
And
I would say that's it.
it's so important to keep that, and I think it's one of the reasons that when people have kids, some of that comes back. But responsibility does not mean boring, and they should not be synonymous. That optimism and that shine in your eye when it comes to like thinking of the things that you want to get done. Like if everything is so serious and everything is so pessimistic and you're so concerned about everything going wrong and sideways, how do you actually bring yourself to do the things that require that same energy that you're spending doing the exact opposite? It becomes that much more
Right.
difficult.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think people have this idea in their mind that in order to be a kid, that it's actually quite difficult, right? You need to have money to go pursue that hobby and you need to get the perfect bike and the helmet and the gear and all the stuff and you need a car to transport it. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't take a lot to tap into those feelings, right? As a kid, you didn't need all that stuff to enjoy yourself. You could walk out the door and see a gecko on the floor and mess around with that for 30 minutes and be very pleased. And I'm not saying that we should all go out and mess with a
Like it
bunch of
goes.
geckos. It's horrific. But I think just keep it simple, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. And that's another lesson I also want to tell younger version of me is don't overthink things either. Kids don't. Kids don't overthink stuff. So yeah, keep it simple. You don't need all the gear and all the bikes. Find people that kind of have that stuff because they want to give it to you. They want to share that stuff with you. So instead of thinking about pursuing things in order to connect with people, i.e., I need the bike in order to go biking with people, go find the people first and they'll give you the bike, right? You need to have this people first mentality and everything else will come from that, right? Even here right now, right? I am talking to you through my phone on 30 megabits per second internet and it's plugged into the wall at a certain angle just so that I can talk to you. We don't have a super expensive computer and a mic and all this stuff, right? If we had thought that that's what we needed in order to get this done and do this today, we would never do it.
Yeah,
We just quit. We
we
quit.
almost pushed it out, and it would have been another couple of weeks, and then it would have been another couple of months, and then I would have been like, "Oh, look, another decade's gone by."
It doesn't have to be perfect. Just do the thing, and over time, sure, maybe you'll make some more money, and you can get all the tricks and all the gear and all the stuff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just keep it simple.
Yeah, I think that is the perfect way to wrap it up. And for anyone that does listen and get all the way to the end, I think the sum and recap is make sure you get your nipples wet and go outside and pet geckos, because life is not that serious. And even as you get older, responsibility doesn't mean you should be boring, and you should try to enjoy it, even though optimism is expensive. And thank you for anyone that listened to the entirety of the first relaunched episode. of the podcast.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, buddy.